So Cena is alive, right? What is up? Good mic work commentaries back at you with episode 447. I am your host, Greg Morgan, here to give you your July 31st Raw review and August 1st SmackDown review, and I think I speak for all of us when I say one of these shows was a million times better than the other. In addition to that, it's been a very strange week of wrestling news. Some really bizarre stories have been floating around out there on the website, so I'm sure I'm going to touch on a couple of those. Before we get started, I just want to give you a quick programming note here. I am leaving for a small vacation this weekend. I'll be leaving Saturday, and I won't be coming back until late on Wednesday night. Wednesday nights are normally the nights that I do my commentary, so I seriously doubt by the time I get in on Wednesday, I'm going to have time to watch Raw and watch SmackDown and record a commentary and put it all together. So next week's episode 448, it will be delayed just a day or two. I'm going to shoot to get something up by Friday of next week, so keep that in mind that next week's episode will just be delayed a little bit, and it could be as late as Friday or even early Saturday until I'm able to get anything up. But in the meantime, I invite all of you to follow me on Twitter if you have not yet already at Good Mic Work. If anything crazy happens in the world of wrestling, if any big news story breaks or anything earth-shattering happens, just go to my Twitter page and I will at least comment about it. I should have cell service where I am. I'm actually going camping in the Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. I really hope that I run into the thrill seekers cutting a promo in the woods. But apparently the place I'm going does have some service up there, so I fully expect to be able to use the internet and my phone while I am there. So if anything happens, just check my Twitter page and I will give some comments about it via tweets. And then I'll talk about it when I get back in next week's episode. I want to go ahead and get started here because I want to get Raw the fuck out of the way. How horrible was Raw this week? I mean, Jesus, this show put me to fucking sleep. I was extremely disappointed with Monday Night Raw, and the order of the matches was really weird too. I cannot believe they put that triple threat in the middle of the card and put Cass and Big Show in the main event. I mean, I guess they're trying to give Cass a rub or whatever, but that was one of the worst Monday Night Raw main events of the year, maybe even in a couple of years, in my opinion. But why don't we start with the beginning of Raw, because a major bombshell was dropped in the opening promo. Of course, last week, Kurt Angle announced that Brock Lesnar would have to defend the WWE title at SummerSlam in a fatal four-way against everybody, against Samoa Joe, Braun Strowman, and Roman Reigns. So this week, Paul Heyman and Lesnar were on Raw to confront Kurt Angle and be like, yo, dude, what the fuck? Paul Heyman is furious about the fatal four-way, saying that Kurt Angle is being instructed to get the belt off of Brock Lesnar and return it to Monday Night Raw full-time, and the only way Kurt could really do that is to put Brock Lesnar in an uphill battle, an extreme uphill battle. So Paul Heyman looks at Kurt Angle and says, if Brock Lesnar loses the title in this match, then Brock will leave the WWE and I will go with him. Holy shit. Now, one of the big news stories of the week was the UFC show where Jon Jones called out Brock Lesnar after his victory. Says, if you want to come back to the UFC and find out what it's like to get your ass kicked by somebody 40 pounds lighter than you, then I'm here waiting for you. And Brock Lesnar even barked back and said, be careful what you wish for, young man. We've heard some of the rumors about Brock returning to the UFC, re-entering the drug testing pool and the whole deal, and trying to finish out the last 5 months of his suspension so he can return and fight again in the UFC and potentially redeem himself from the shitstorm surrounding his drug suspension after his return last year. And now you fast forward to Raw and you've got Paul Heyman making this announcement. To me, this means one of two things. To me, it's a done deal. Brock Lesnar is headed back to UFC and he's going to take some time off after SummerSlam to fully concentrate on his return to the UFC. I'm assuming he's going to start training and getting back, like I said, in the drug testing pool and all of that. It either means that or it means WWE knows that the media is all over this Jon Jones news. It was on every sports show imaginable after this happened. So maybe WWE feels, since the fans are buzzing about it anyway, if they make this stipulation, a lot of people are going to assume that Brock Lesnar is going to drop the belt and leave the WWE. But he's under contract until next year, and he's advertised for shows after SummerSlam. It's like, can Brock Lesnar really leave? Did he really work something out with Vince McMahon to leave early and for him just to drop it at SummerSlam? I don't think so. I think Brock is not going to fully leave the WWE. He might leave the WWE in storyline because, let's face it, Brock is not on TV that much anyway. Since he's been back for the last 5 years, they could have ran storylines of him leaving the WWE anytime they wanted because he's always gone for 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 months at a time. So this is really interesting when you look at it. In last week's episode, I was really pushing hard for Braun Strowman to be the guy to come out of this match as the Universal Champion, especially the way they've been pushing him and building him as this monster. If he goes out there and beats all three of these behemoths, he's gonna be the fucking man, and he's gonna be able to fill that void of Brock Lesnar. If Brock Lesnar is really gonna be leaving, or if he's not gonna be on TV again until October or November or something like that, you've got another guy that fills that void of being this unstoppable, scary monster in Braun Strowman. So I think hands down he should be the guy to walk out of SummerSlam with the belt. If it turns out to be Samoa Joe, fine. If it turns out to be Roman Reigns, fine. I really don't give a shit. I just think Braun Strowman is the best choice here. And I also mentioned Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns likely working for the title throughout the fall. So if Braun Strowman wins the belt, Brock Lesnar's gone, so you don't have to worry about a rematch there, and you can go with Braun and Roman, or maybe even throw Samoa Joe in the mix if you have to. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if we get a Hell in a Cell match between Braun Strowman and Roman Reigns for the title, whenever the hell that pay-per-view is. So this new added stipulation makes me nervous a little bit. I'm hoping that WWE only did this because of the Jon Jones fight rumors and what Jon Jones did after his victory at UFC. Had that challenge not happened, then I don't know if this stipulation would have been added or not. It may not have. So this could just be adding some interest, some intrigue to the match, and a lot of people are going to tune in to see if Brock Lesnar is going to be wrestling in the WWE for the last time. And whatever they do, I'm pretty sure it's kayfabe. So even if Brock drops the belt here and he quote-unquote leaves WWE, I still think he comes back. He has to. He's got to be around next year for the Royal Rumble. He's got to be around for WrestleMania. They've done too much with this guy. They pay him too much. I think Brock does enjoy being in the WWE and the schedule that he has. And if he wants to go off to the UFC, fine, and do another fight there, fine. If anybody can pull it off, Brock can. He's already done it once. But as far as him completely severing ties with WWE, I don't think so. I think he's going to stick around there at least until next year's WrestleMania. And if his UFC fight happens before WrestleMania, that's going to dictate what kind of match he's going to have there. So it's really kind of up in the air what winds up happening. Brock Lesnar is in a situation now where he can lose the WWE title at SummerSlam without even being involved in the finish. So if you're ever going to take the belt off of Lesnar and keep him the monster that he is, this is the time to do it. He already lost clean. He got squashed by Goldberg less than a year ago. I don't think it's time for him to take another pin yet. So if he loses the belt at SummerSlam when Braun Strowman pins Roman Reigns or something, he can leave the WWE pissed off. It's kind of confusing how all this is going to work out. What if he goes to the UFC, he faces Jon Jones, and he gets his ass kicked? Then what do you do with Brock at WrestleMania? You can't build him as this monster. You can't put him in the main event or the title match because he got the shit kicked out of him by a guy no bigger than Kurt Hawkins. So I was really nervous when Brock had his first UFC fight last year against Mark Hunt. He won that, and I was incredibly proud of Brock. I'm like, fuck yeah, one of our wrestlers. You know, UFC fans and fans of real sports really look down on wrestling, and the fact that one of ours went over there and dominated and won the UFC championship and then made a comeback and beat a very credible fighter, I was proud as hell as a wrestling fan. And then when that all came crashing down after the positive drug test, I was like, well, fuck. So if Brock Lesnar now goes back and redeems himself for that and beats a really good fighter in Jon Jones. Now, it was hard to predict Brock Lesnar to beat Mark Hunt a year ago. It's going to be really hard to predict him to beat this guy who's a complete badass. So I think that match and that fight is going to generate a lot of money, and it's a win-win for everybody involved. Brock Lesnar is going to get paid a shit ton of money. Jones is going to get paid a shit ton of money. UFC is going to make some money, and WWE is going to make some money, because for them to allow Brock to go do this before his WWE contract expires, you know UFC is going to have to give them something in return, like they did the first time when they were promoting the shit out of SummerSlam and all of that. So anytime WWE and UFC, they start crossing, it gets really crazy because it really affects how you try to predict what WWE is going to do in their storylines. It all hinges on what Brock Lesnar's plans are, what he wants to do in the UFC, what he will do in the UFC, and when that will happen. No matter what they do in storyline, I don't think Brock is really going to be done with WWE until his contract is up. And last time his contract was up, he re-signed for another 3 years because he gets paid well for it. He hardly has to work at all. So why would Brock Lesnar want to give up that sort of schedule? And I think think if he does return to the UFC, it's going to be just for one fight. I don't think Brock Lesnar is going to return full time. He's 40 years old now. He's arguably past his prime. I think this is something that Lesnar wants to do to right the wrong that happened last year after the positive drug test. And if he goes into UFC completely clean and beats one of their best guys, that's going to be an enormous sense of pride for him and for wrestling fans and the WWE. It's a huge win for them if Brock goes over to UFC and beats this guy's ass. WWE would do anything to re-sign Brock for another 3 years if that happens. So we're not really going to know for sure, probably until early next year, what the hell Brock Lesnar is going to do. And apparently if he does go back to the UFC, that fight cannot happen in 2017. There's not enough time left at the end of this year for him to finish up his suspension. So the earliest that he can even fight in the UFC is probably going to be right before WrestleMania 34. So this whole thing is very interesting, to say the least. You guys leave me all your thoughts about it in the comments below. Let me know what you think is going to happen. If they do put this fight together with Jon Jones, what do you think happens? Does Brock get the shit kicked out of him, or does Brock win? And plus, there's a big weight difference, and I don't know how the weights are classified in UFC. I'm guessing Jon Jones either needs to gain some weight or Brock Lesnar needs to lose some weight for them to be able to compete against each other, so I don't know what the rules are with that. You guys can fill me in on those details. But judging from the couple of fights I've seen Jon Jones in, it is going to be a tall order for Brock Lesnar to beat this guy. But the whole thing's really interesting. I guess we'll just have to sit back and wait and see what happens. And like I said, right now for SummerSlam, my money is still on Braun Strowman. He's who I want to come out of this thing as champion. As we get closer and we have more build and we get a couple of weeks out from SummerSlam, that might change. But right now, I'm sticking with Braun Strowman. Speaking of Braun Strowman, I'll get into his bizarre story here in a minute, but that triple threat match with Roman Reigns and Samoa Joe took place in the middle of the card. They announced this triple threat last week on Raw, and I thought this would be a pretty good match because last week's brawl in that segment with Kurt Angle was really good. That was an awesome segment, so I thought the match would be pretty good, but it was just okay. You know, I didn't see anything too jaw-dropping in there. All the guys worked really hard. Roman Reigns, of course, won, spearing and pinning Samoa Joe to get the victory there. I know the fans hated that, but I don't think Roman is going to win the Universal title at SummerSlam, so if he's got to win a couple of matches during the build to SummerSlam, who cares? I don't think there's any point in complaining about Roman Reigns winning on Monday Night Raw. As long as he doesn't win at SummerSlam, I think people should just fucking relax. And like I said, speaking of the guy that I am predicting to be the new Universal Champion come SummerSlam, he was involved in a very interesting story that took place in a bar when WWE was in Nashville for Raw a couple of weeks ago. Apparently, there was a whole bunch of Global Force Wrestling and WWE guys in the same bar. And Karen Jarrett was there, and she approached Braun Strowman to apparently tell him that her son, who is also the son of Kurt Angle, because she used to be married to Kurt Angle, is a big fan of Braun Strowman's, and she wanted to get an autograph for him, and apparently Braun Strowman told her to fuck off, or something like that, or fuck your son, or whatever, and then she goes nuts on him, screams and yells at him, cuts a promo on him in front of the whole bar, and tells him that she's going to tell her kid's father what he said, and her kid's father is Kurt Angle, because apparently Braun Strowman had no idea who Karen Jarrett was. And the story goes that apparently Braun Strowman got freaked out, dropped to his knees, and literally begged Karen Jarrett not to tell Kurt Angle. And I'm reading this, I'm like, this cannot be true. I mean, Braun Strowman is not stupid. He knows that Kurt Angle is not the GM of Raw, right? He knows that Kurt Angle cannot harm his career in any way. It shouldn't matter if Kurt Angle finds this out or not. Yeah, it might be a little bit embarrassing. Yeah, Kurt Angle, I think I accidentally told your son to fuck off or something like that, but it should be nothing that's going to affect Braun Strowman's career in any way. And apparently he was wasted, of course, and he got down on his knees and was begging her not to tell. And I'm just completely baffled by this story, and I'm like, there's no way this fucking happened, but a lot of people are verifying this story. And Karen Jarrett has finally spoken out about this. She did an interview recently, and I read a little bit of that, and she was really downplaying the whole thing, really saying, hey, it was no big deal. It was just a bunch of wrestlers having a good time. We were screwing around, and a lot of people took it seriously, and basically covering for Braun Strowman, which, I guess she's probably legit. I mean, the relationship between Global Force and WWE right now is not good, especially with the whole Broken Hardys thing going on. And of course, Matt Hardy is there, and his wife has spoke out on Twitter against Karen Jarrett and all this shit. So it's not like both sides are all buddy-buddy. If she really wanted to stick it to WWE, she could have gone off on Braun Strowman in that interview. She could have said he was a complete drunk, he was an asshole, he was a jerk, he was a prick, he told me to fuck off, he said fuck my son, and when I told him who I was, then he tried to backpedal and get on my good side and beg me not to tell Kurt. So if that really happened, you would think that Karen Jarrett would want to take advantage of this opportunity of making the WWE look bad, but she didn't. She completely downplayed it and acted like it was no big deal at all. So whatever happened in that bar, I guess we will never know. And I've always thought that Karen and Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett love triangle was very bizarre because that was very real life. And TNA was even bringing it into storyline. Kurt Angle and Jeff Jarrett were somehow able to work together after Karen left Angle for Jarrett. I mean, ladies, are there any women listening to this commentary? Who's hotter, Kurt Angle or Jeff Jarrett? Like, I want your honest opinion. If you were married to Kurt Angle, would you leave him for Jeff Jarrett? I'm just curious. But that whole situation is weird. That whole story is weird. And I got a huge kick out of reading all of those different accounts of what took place in that bar with Karen and Strowman. But let's get back to Monday Night Raw and pick back up here. We had Seth Rollins defeating Sheamus in a one-on-one match, and what did you guys think of Seth Rollins' new theme, or the tweaking of his theme? Right at the beginning of his song, when there's that pause, you now hear a loud scream of "Burn it down," and it kind of sounded cool. I liked it. I thought it was a really good addition, and I think that it was probably designed to get the crowd to scream it at the beginning of all of his entrances, because crowd involvement really helps a wrestler. We've seen what it's done for Kurt Angle when they sing his theme song, for John Cena when they sing his, for Shinske Nakamura when they sing his, for Bobby Roode when they sing his. Whenever you can have crowd involvement like that, I think it's really going to help somebody. And Seth, I think we can all agree, is an awesome wrestler. We all like him and respect him, but he's kind of struggled to get over as a babyface, in my opinion. He's not getting over to the level that I think WWE wants him to be, considering his position on the roster. So maybe adding this into his theme song is a way to get the crowd involved in his entrance. And I think it will sound really cool if eventually the crowd all starts chanting that at the same time. I think that can help him. If not, I think they should go with a swerve, because when we're watching this situation play out between Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, Dean is very apprehensive. They even had a really humorous backstage promo on Raw where Renee Young is interviewing her husband, Dean Ambrose, and she asks him, "Are you and Seth getting back together?" And it was just the way she worded it and the way it sounded. It made it sound like they were lovers, which I found really funny, especially the fact that that question was coming from Dean Ambrose's wife. And Seth Rollins then comes in, and the two of them have a little banter back and forth. They're trying to get along, but Dean still is adamant that he really does not trust Seth Rollins. And he gave him a big hug last week when they won their tag match or whatever, but that was kind of in the heat of the moment. He left Seth hanging when Seth tried to do the Shield fist bump thing, and Dean is just really standoffish. And a lot of people are predicting that Dean Ambrose is eventually going to turn heel. Dean Ambrose is long overdue for a heel turn, in my opinion. I think he should have turned heel a while ago, so this seems inevitable to me. But what if they had a little bit of fun and swerved us here? I got to thinking about that, because everybody's expecting Dean Ambrose to turn heel. Everybody's talking about it online. The cat is out of the bag, so to speak. So maybe WWE swerves us here and has Seth turn heel again. Maybe he turns heel on Dean Ambrose, and now imagine Dean being so pissed off because Seth got him twice, and now he's going to go completely ballistic. But the problem with that is it keeps Dean Ambrose as a babyface, and I think we need him to go heel. So I think Dean right now is probably the better bet to go heel, but if WWE really wanted to twist things around, they could have Seth turn heel again. Seth's a pretty good heel, and I think he's a better heel than he is a babyface at this point, so that might make the most sense to do it with Seth. And plus, it would surprise the hell out of the fans, so why not? But it looks like they're going to get a title shot against Sheamus and Cesaro at SummerSlam after Seth Rollins beats Sheamus. He's attacked then by Cesaro, and the two of them are double teaming him. Dean Ambrose actually does run out there to make the save, but he gets beat down himself, and Cesaro and Sheamus stand tall over the carcasses of Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins. So I guess next week on Raw, they're going to be pissed off, most likely demand a tag team title match, which I'm sure Kurt Angle will grant them at SummerSlam. And during the build to SummerSlam, we're probably going to get more one-on-one matches with Dean Ambrose taking on Cesaro or Sheamus or whatever the fuck. We had Bayley defeating Nia Jax via countout. Bayley sidestepped Nia when Nia went for a spear on the outside of the ring and wound up ramming herself into the steel steps. Bayley scoots back in the ring and gets the countout victory, and she's scheduled to face Alexa Bliss, of course, at SummerSlam for the Raw Women's title. And I say scheduled because Bayley suffered a shoulder injury in that match with Nia Jax. You could tell her arm, it looked legit because her arm was kind of hanging down. She was having trouble moving it. Even after the match, Alexa tried to jump in and attack her, and Bayley had to roll out of the ring to get away from her. At the very end, she tried to throw a punch, and her arm barely even came up. So this girl can either sell really well or she is legitimately hurt. And they even had some pictures and some footage, I believe, of her backstage getting checked out by the doctors in the training room after Raw, and she had her shoulder all taped up with ice. And now she's questionable for that match with Alexa Bliss. She was supposed to have an MRI done, and I tried to go online today and see if there's any news. We don't see anything yet. It just said WWE hopes to have an idea of what Bayley's status will be by next week. So right now her match is up in the air, and that's kind of sad. I hope Bayley's injury isn't serious. I hope it's not something that she needs surgery for, but it might be. And if she has to drop out of that match with Alexa Bliss, they're going to have to determine a new number one contender, and they might wind up giving Sasha that opportunity. But I think Bayley is also a very integral part of whenever they turn Sasha Banks heel. Whenever they do that with Sasha, if they do it, I think Bayley needs to be involved. I just hope she's not out for 6 months or anything like that. A long hiatus would probably do the Bayley character some good, but I don't want that to happen at the expense of this poor girl being injured or having to go through surgery or rehab. That stuff's a pain in the ass, and you never like to see any athlete go through that. So I'm definitely not wishing any injury on Bayley here. I hope she's fine, and I hope she's able to work her match with Alexa at SummerSlam. We had a Bray Wyatt promo, typical Bray Wyatt stuff, talking about Finn Balor, very boring. I mentioned last week that I have high hopes for this feud and this match, especially when Finn Balor most likely appears as the Demon at SummerSlam. But this was a segment that I didn't really like. Balor tried to play some head games with Bray Wyatt during Bray's promo. I think the lights went out and you heard a portion of Finn Balor's theme. They came back on and he's in the ring with his back turned to Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt approaches him from behind, and then Finn Balor hits him with that backwards kick thing, brawls with him a little bit, and Bray Wyatt retreats through the crowd, and that was the end of it. So I was hoping for a little bit more out of that segment than what we got, but I'm not losing interest yet. I still think this can be a fun program, and I think this can be a really fun match at SummerSlam. We had a Miz TV segment with Jason Jordan. This, of course, was announced last week. I think we can all see the writing on the wall here. The only reason they would do a segment like this is to set up a Miz versus Jason Jordan Intercontinental title match at SummerSlam. The segment was pretty bad because Jason Jordan is pretty bad. And I speculated last week of some different things that they could do with Jason Jordan. I think the one thing they absolutely must do with this guy is turn him heel. He is a terrible babyface. His promos are so bad. They are so cheesy. They are so good guy. It's very much like The Rock in 1996 when he came in as Rocky Maivia, and he was just this puke-inducing good guy. It drove everybody nuts, and Jason Jordan, I think, might be told to act this way. I think WWE is purposely giving him lame shit to say to somehow maybe recreate some of the same type of heat that The Rock had back in 96. And remember, back then when Rock first came in, he won the Intercontinental title like 2 months after he had debuted at Survivor Series. By February, he was Intercontinental Champion, defeating Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And we speculated that maybe he was not Kurt Angle's son. He was never Kurt Angle's son. And the whole story was made up and was fabricated to help get Jason Jordan an opportunity. And this whole thing is a big ruse, including his horrible babyface promos. Maybe he is playing this character on purpose. He's making the fans think that he's this smiling good guy that kisses the babies and has all this pride and self-respect. I mean, this guy is worse than John Cena when you listen to his promos. But in the ring, he's an absolute beast. The Miz is all over him. The entire Miz Taraj are right in his face. Miz is talking shit about Kurt Angle. Jason Jordan finally has enough, winds up hitting the Miz, and German suplexes him into Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel, and they all collapse, and Jason Jordan exits the ring, having disposed of the entire Miz Taraj with one move. And the way this guy is so physically menacing and how strong he is, I can easily see Jason Jordan being this badass heel. So I'm hoping that this whole disgusting, lame, boring babyface character that he's playing is all just a ruse for the big heel turn in the future. I also mentioned last week that I wouldn't be surprised at all if Corey Graves has something to do with his heel turn, because remember, it was Corey Graves that showed Kurt Angle that initial text message right from the beginning. So I think he could somehow be involved in this, possibly even Chad Gable, because we saw him on SmackDown, which I'll talk about in a minute, do a really nice Kurt Angle style moonsault and put Rusev in an ankle lock. So, maybe Chad Gable is tied into this somehow as well. Let's see, what else did we have happen on Raw? We had Elias Sampson defeating Kalisto in a random match. We had Akira Tozawa, Rich Swann, and Cedric Alexander winning a 6-man against Daivari, Tony Nese, and TJ Perkins. And they had a number 1 contenders match on 205 Live between Tozawa and Daivari, and Tozawa won that. So he will now go on to SummerSlam to face Neville for the title. And I know Tozawa kind of has a storyline connected with him. He's hooked up with Titus O'Neil and all of that, but I don't know if I want to see him beat Neville. I want to see Neville keep rolling. I think since Neville has held this belt for so long, when he finally does lose it, he needs to lose it to either a newcomer or a returning star, in my opinion. Somebody that'll surprise us, somebody that'll shock us, somebody that can take down Neville, and he can have a whole bunch of awesome rematches with. He's already done a lot with Tozawa so far, and if Tozawa takes the belt off of him, that just means we're going to get more matches, and I don't know. Tozawa might very well win the Cruiserweight title, and I'm not saying he's not worthy or anything like that, but considering how dominant Neville has been and how long he's held that belt, I'm not ready to see him drop it yet. We also had the Hardy Boyz defeating Gallows and Anderson. The Revival was on commentary for this, and as the Hardy Boyz are leaving, coming up the ramp, the Revival attacks them. There's this big brawl. Gallows and Anderson also gets involved, and the Hardys beat the shit out of everybody. They kick all 4 of their asses, and then even Jeff leaps off of Matt Hardy's back and dives off the little rampway there onto the floor, onto one of the Revival guys. And they completely just kicked everybody's ass. And then I saw an interview on WWE.com or WWE's YouTube page or something like that where they interviewed the Hardy Boyz backstage after Raw. And what I like is that they kept talking about how they were being woken. So instead of broken, they're woken. They might be the woken Hardys. And there's been this big awakening, and Matt Hardy was kind of using some of his broken language. And so they're still teasing it. Things are not any better in the lawsuit or the fight for the broken gimmicks with Global Force Wrestling. They are not willing to give this up. It's getting nastier and nastier by the day. Rebby, of course, will not shut the fuck up on Twitter about the whole thing. And so maybe WWE is sick of waiting for this broken nonsense to get resolved. So they're going to do their own version of it and call it the Woken Hardys. So we'll have to see where that goes. But I found that pretty humorous. And then, of course, the main event was a big pile of dog shit. Cass defeated Big Show via DQ when Enzo just jumped in the ring, jumped on the back of Cass, and then Big Show winds up hitting Cass with a knockout punch, but they both fall down, and then his music plays and the show is over. Just terrible main event. One of the worst main events I have ever seen. Speaking of Enzo, here's one of those other crazy news stories that's been floating around. Apparently, after a WWE live event or something, I forgot what town they were in, Enzo found himself in a strip club. And apparently one of the strippers that he was interacting with was not impressed with Enzo. And she went on Twitter, not so much to rant, but just to tell people the story of this obnoxious douchebag who works for the WWE, that's cheap as hell, who's high off of his ass, and just talking so much shit about how famous he is and how awesome he is and how rich he is. And she said the whole thing was kind of strange. She didn't even know who he was, but she engaged in the conversation because she thought that she could make some money and get some money out of him. And all he was doing was like tipping singles. I think he only like tipped $10. And strippers are used to making over $1,000 a night. So, she finds this guy incredibly cheap. And he was so full of shit because he was talking so much shit. And she revealed big parts of their conversation. Go on any wrestling website or go on Twitter. You can find this stuff. She gave some pretty interesting details of what was talked about between the two of them, including the fact that he was high and she somehow knew that that was a $2,500 fine by the WWE. Enzo must have told her, oh, I can be high because I only get fined $2,500, and was just bragging about how awesome he was and this and that. Pretty funny story, and it sounds pretty typical. I've heard a few stories lately about Enzo. He's not really well liked. He's kind of a fucking little weirdo. There was even some story about Roman Reigns kicking him off a bus or something for acting obnoxious or whatever. So when I picture Enzo inside of a strip club, acting like he's all that, talking shit to the ladies about how rich and awesome he is, and inviting them back to his house or his bus or his hotel to smoke weed and get drunk and fuck and all this kind of stuff, I can actually see Enzo doing that. And when I looked at this stripper's Twitter page, I should actually pull her name up here and give her credit. Let me just pull this up 1 second here. Okay, her name apparently is Queen Bee. You can find her at Kiki B Tard. So KIKIBEETARD on Twitter. And she's got some Enzo shit pinned right to the top of her page here. Pretty funny stuff. So apparently she was not impressed with Enzo. Pretty decent looking girl, I guess, and damn, she only has 1,300 followers. So anyway, if you want to see any of her Twitter rants on Enzo, go check out her Twitter profile. But pretty funny story there and pretty random. Now, can we finally move on to the good show? Let's move on to SmackDown. This was phenomenal. Coming off a shitty Battleground just a couple of weeks ago, SmackDown really stacked the deck here and gave us an awesome show, and the main event was a match that was only announced a week prior. And that was going to be a #1 contenders match for the WWE title between John Cena and Shinske Nakamura. In a lot of ways, this could be considered a dream match. Nakamura was a huge star, a legend in Japan, and here he is in the WWE going up against their biggest star of the last 10 years. This is a very, very big match, and a match that I was really looking forward to. My only argument was that they didn't build this up even more. They were giving it away for free on TV, which is great for us, but I would have liked to see maybe just a little bit more build. Doesn't have to be a lot of build. They can just do a couple of weeks, especially if it's a match taking place on TV to determine a #1 contender for SummerSlam. I just wish they would have done more than just randomly announcing that these two guys are going to face each other. Maybe announce their match to take place 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time. That way they can do a couple of promos and a couple of interactions. Maybe even a tag team match where there's some miscommunication and Nakamura accidentally kicks John Cena in the face or some shit like that. You know, the stuff that they normally do. Build this thing a little bit more, prep it a little bit more, get the fans ready so you can spark yourself a really good rating. And I'm sure SmackDown will do okay in the ratings, but they only gave the fans 1 week's notice for this epic match taking place. Remember, way back in 2002, Stone Cold Steve Austin walked out of the WWE for this very reason. He was put in a match with Brock Lesnar where he was going to lose. It was going to be a King of the Ring qualifying match or something like that. So the stakes are a little bit higher in Cena and Nakamura's match, but still, they called Austin and say, oh, by the way, next week you're facing Brock and you're going to lose. And he goes, wait a minute, I'm Stone Cold Steve Austin. I got no problem jobbing to this guy, but don't you think we should build a little bit more here, trying to get some money off of this? Try to sell some tickets, try to get a better rating, give this thing a little bit more build than just announcing it randomly a week ahead of time. So I kind of saw a lot of similarities with this match, but I didn't care. I mean, this was a match I was really interested to see, and boy, did it live up to the hype. A lot of people were very nervous that John Cena was going to win this match. I was one of those people. I mentioned it in my commentary last week that I thought John Cena was going to be the guy to face Jinder Mahal. It felt like it. It felt like that's what they were building towards, especially with Jinder Mahal's promos about how he's so hated in America. It seems like anybody he's going to feud with are going to be American guys. So I was worried that John Cena was going to AA and pin Nakamura in their first encounter, and that was going to suck because I want to see Nakamura be on top of the roster or be a main event player. But what we got was an incredible match. I mean, like John Cena or not, this guy has amazing match after amazing match after amazing match, and both of these guys deserve a shit ton of credit for putting on a performance like this, considering they've never worked together before. And this match more than lived up to expectations and had a very, very scary finish when Nakamura lifted Cena up. I don't know if it was a belly-to-back suplex or whatever the hell that move was, but he flipped Cena over too much. Cena probably thought he was doing one move, Nakamura was doing another one, and Cena landed directly on the back of his head in a really sick and scary bump. Had he landed a little bit differently, he could have broken his neck, and I'm surprised that he didn't break his neck. And you know what? That was the finish of the match. As soon as John Cena was dropped on his head like that, he was supposed to get up right away to take Shinske's finishing move, and he did. He got right up and took that finisher and got pinned, and you could see Nakamura was really concerned. Even after the pin, he scooted like just a little bit closer to John Cena. They did the show of respect at the end, which I actually liked. Sometimes I don't like the handshakes, but this was one of those situations where I really did like it, and you saw Nakamura say, I'm sorry. You could see him saying that to John Cena. So I kind of felt bad for John Cena because his head must hurt like a motherfucker, but I also felt bad for Shinske because he is put in the ring. He's trusted to go in there with WWE's most expensive vase, and he breaks it. I mean, he was probably scared shitless that I might have just permanently injured John Cena or threatened his career somehow by dropping him on his head like that. But John Cena seemed totally cool with it. They had a nice handshake and a nice show of respect at the end, and that was it. And it was fucking awesome. Now, when SmackDown went off the air, apparently Baron Corbin jumped in the ring to attack Shinske Nakamura, and John Cena fought him off and wound up putting Baron Corbin through a table. So after John Cena took that nasty bump, not only did he take Shinsuke's finisher, but he also had enough left in the tank to fight Baron Corbin and put the motherfucker through a table. So props to John Cena for being a tough bastard. If I am dropped on my head like that, you're not going to hear from me for 3 years. And John Cena was up in 3 seconds. So that's pretty goddamn amazing. Now we're moving on to SummerSlam, and we've got Shinske Nakamura taking on Jinder Mahal for the WWE title. That's a match that I did not see happening a month ago. I'm really surprised that they're going with this, and I'm fine with it. I think it's going to be awesome, especially with the tie-in between Shinske and Baron Corbin. They had a match at Battleground. They had a rematch on SmackDown. Baron Corbin is the current Money in the Bank briefcase holder. You gotta think he's going to be involved in the finish of SummerSlam somehow. If Shinske Nakamura wins, Baron Corbin's got to come in and cash that thing in. And what I potentially see happening here now, I bet you next week on SmackDown, they're going to start building towards a John Cena versus Baron Corbin match at SummerSlam. I think that's who John Cena is going to face. And I think John Cena's long streak of losses at SummerSlam comes to an end this year, and he defeats Baron Corbin. You want to know why? Because Baron Corbin can lose. It doesn't matter. He's the briefcase holder. If he loses to John Cena, it's going to be totally forgotten when he shows up later on and cashes in, much like Seth Rollins when he lost to Randy Orton at WrestleMania. We forgot all about that when we got to the main event and he was walking out of WrestleMania as the WWE champion. And plus, now that John Cena has been losing a lot more matches lately and he just jobbed clean again on TV, no less, to Shinske Nakamura, a guy who he's never even faced before, I think Cena needs to start winning some matches in case they eventually build to a John Cena versus Roman Reigns match. Potentially at Survivor Series. I've mentioned WrestleMania. I think that would be a great WrestleMania match, but I think it would also be a really good Survivor Series match. They gave us a huge one last year with Brock Lesnar and Goldberg. I think they want to follow that up with another huge one this year, a big main event, a big marquee match, and John Cena versus Roman Reigns could be just the match they need. And it's possible that he could stick around on SmackDown and not go to Raw at all. And if he did, then we can get a rematch between John Cena and Shinske Nakamura, because generally when John Cena loses a match, he eventually winds up defeating that person in the future. So maybe John Cena did the honors for Nakamura on SmackDown, and maybe if Nakamura wins the belt and Corbin does not cash in, maybe John Cena defeats Nakamura for that belt. Don't forget, he's going after that 17th title reign. His next one breaks the record, and John Cena's never been Universal Champion before, so I think John Cena is most likely going to break the record by winning the Universal title, but, you know, that's not set in stone. He could stick around on SmackDown and have more matches with Nakamura in the future, but as far as what we saw on this past week's SmackDown between those two guys, bravo, excellent job. Could have been disastrous with that botch at the end, but Cena recovered and showed everyone what a boss he truly is. So kudos to both guys for a job well done, and good luck to Nakamura in your match with Jinder. Everybody loves Nakamura, and I'm happy that he's getting this title shot because a lot of people have been talking about WWE dropping the ball a little bit on Nakamura, not treating him like the different type of wrestler that he is. They should treat him more like an attraction. And I feel that when he came onto the main roster, they should have booked him differently. Instead of booking him the same way as they do everybody else, by giving him one opponent with a couple of pay-per-view matches and a couple of TV matches and him working little miniature programs with different guys like Dolph Ziggler, like Baron Corbin, I think they should have lined one opponent up at a time for him. I think they should have just booked him differently. I think his very first pay-per-view match, he should have defeated Dolph Ziggler, and that was the end of it. And then they throw somebody else at him at the next pay-per-view, and he beats that guy. You throw him different guys on TV where he's beating one guy after another with no stupid promos, with no horrible interviews, with no rematches, with no shady non-finishes or anything like that. One opponent at a time. He beats one guy, moves on to the next, beats him, moves on to the next, beats him, moves on to the next, until eventually he's built himself up into a number one contenders match against John Cena and defeats him there. I think that would have been a much better way to book Shinske. Not everybody has to be booked in the traditional way, and if there's one guy that's not traditional, it's Shinske fucking Nakamura. And I wish that they would have done things a little bit differently with him, but at the same time, who am I to complain? Who am I to say that WWE has dropped the ball with Shinske Nakamura when he's getting a WWE title shot at the second biggest pay-per-view of the year? So on one hand, I feel like they could have done things a little bit better, but on the other hand, he's getting a title shot, so they must be doing something right. But as always, I'm interested to hear what all of you guys think about this match at SummerSlam with Jinder Mahal. And do you think he's going to win the title? And is the Baron Corbin cash-in really that predictable? Right now, that's looking like the direction they're going. I mean, these two guys already have an issue with each other as it is. And having Shinske win and Baron Corbin cashing in seems extremely likely and predictable at this point, unless WWE wants to keep running with Jinder. The other big news coming out of SmackDown this week is that we have a United States title match now set for SummerSlam. It is going to be a rematch between AJ Styles and Kevin Owens. I mentioned when this feud first started that this whole thing could blow off at SummerSlam, and now we got a stipulation added to this thing. They did another match between the two on SmackDown because, of course, AJ Styles won the title last week in that triple threat. Owens invoked his rematch clause immediately. The referee took a terrible ref bump. They even had to redo it. It looked like Mike Chioda was supposed to get punched accidentally, I think, by Kevin Owens, and he just missed terribly, and then the three of them had to kind of sit there and kind of redo the whole thing. Finally, Mike Chioda takes a really terrible-looking punch to the face or to his eyes, and he can't see anything, and then AJ Styles ends up rolling up Kevin Owens. Chioda counts 3, but Kevin Owens' shoulder is clearly and easily off the mat, which he doesn't see. AJ Styles retains and goes off to the back. Now, Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon are in the back talking to the referee, saying, dude, you fucked up bad. We got to deal with this now. He's like, I'm sorry, I couldn't see anything. I didn't know what the hell was going on. Kevin Owens then storms in, and this was one of the best segments of the night, and he is furious. This actually felt real. He looked like he was legitimately pissed off about getting fucked out of the United States title. He even pushes the referee, and Shane and Daniel Bryan are trying to calm him down, and he will not calm down, and he's screaming in their faces. Kevin Owens is so good. I cannot say enough good things about this guy's promo ability and his ability to be believable. It's one of the most important things in wrestling, and Kevin Owens has it better than anybody on that roster, I swear. Really good segment here. So after all of the arguing with Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon, Shane finally says, all right, you're going to get a rematch at SummerSlam against AJ Styles. And Kevin Owens is like, yeah, no shit, I got screwed out of my title. Of course you're going to give me a rematch, but I want a referee who's capable of calling this match properly and correctly and isn't going to screw me over. And then Daniel Bryan chimes in and volunteers Shane McMahon to be the referee. Shane even kind of gives him a look like, why are you doing that? And then kind of says, oh, actually, you know what? That makes sense. Yes, I will be the referee for that match. So instead of the match between Owens and Shane that we thought we were going to get, we're going to get Owens and AJ with Shane as the referee. Which I actually like this a lot better than Owens versus Shane at SummerSlam. I'm fine with Owens and Shane having a feud together. They probably will. But I didn't want to see it take place on the big stage of SummerSlam. So instead, it's going to be taking place probably on a different pay-per-view. So one can only assume here that AJ is going to retain at SummerSlam with the help of Shane McMahon. Maybe Shane McMahon screws over Kevin Owens. Maybe Kevin Owens loses his temper during the match and puts his hands on Shane. And then Shane punches him in the face and he turns around and eats a phenomenal forearm from AJ Styles, and AJ Styles retains, and then Kevin Owens blames Shane McMahon. They could go in the swerve direction here and have Shane McMahon turn heel or something, but I don't think that's going to happen. Shane's pretty over as a babyface. I don't think they would really turn him heel right now, but if they wanted to hook him up with Kevin Owens somehow, I guess they could do that. Maybe Shane McMahon is still bitter at AJ Styles for everything they went through in their program earlier this year and their WrestleMania match, and maybe this is his way of getting revenge by helping Kevin Owens take a belt off of AJ. I don't know. I doubt it, but I guess that is an option. But one can only assume right now that we're going to get a Kevin Owens and Shane McMahon program after SummerSlam concludes, and AJ will retain the U.S. title and go on to face a different opponent. We had an interesting match between Chad Gable and Rusev. I mentioned Chad Gable earlier on when I was talking about Jason Jordan, and he's in there with Rusev, completely overpowered. Rusev is manhandling him, but Gable is still trying to wrestle Rusev and finally gets him down a couple of times. And like I said, there was one point in the match where Chad Gable hit a beautiful Kurt Angle-style moonsault. He put Rusev in the ankle lock. Eventually, Rusev winds up winning with the accolade, and Gable succumbs. But Gable's got some potential there. I think they can push him as a single star. He needs some help, though. He's got a funny look. He's only 202 pounds. Really, when you think about it, this guy should be in the cruiserweight division. But I don't want to see him there because then you're just stuck there and you can't get out. So I'm fine with them keeping him on the SmackDown roster. The little guy can wrestle like a motherfucker. And I even mentioned earlier on that I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he was tied into this Jason Jordan storyline somehow. Maybe he turns out to be somebody else's son. I joked on Twitter that maybe Chad Gable turns out to be Brock Lesnar's son. Or maybe Chad Gable turns out to be Kurt Angle's real son, and Jason Jordan never was. there's a lot of things they could do there, but I wouldn't completely rule out Chad Gable having something to do with Jason Jordan. We've also heard rumors about a potential superstar shakeup or some more roster moves coming in the future. So if they do that, they could put Gable and Jordan on the same brand and they could feud together. There's all sorts of stuff they could do. I guess we'll have to wait and see there. But after Rusev is done defeating him, he gets on the mic pissed off and says, I don't have an opponent for SummerSlam. And out comes Randy Orton to accept the challenge. So they're just throwing Randy Orton and Rusev together because neither one of these guys currently have storylines or currently have angles that they're in. So fuck it. Put the two of them together. Before the segment was over, Rusev did eat an RKO, and we're going to get Randy versus Rusev at SummerSlam. I guess that's no big deal. That'll probably be earlier on in the card. Probably the first match. There's a very good chance that Randy Orton versus Rusev could open SummerSlam. We had a women's tag team match with Becky and Naomi defeating Carmella and Natalya. And there was one spot in the match where I just laughed my ass off. I've never seen Naomi do this before. She might do it in every match, but it was just my first time noticing it. But there's a spot where Carmella is on her knees in the middle of the ring. Naomi hits the ropes, comes into her, slides on her knees on the canvas, right in front of Carmella, and then ends it with a beautiful bitch slap right to the face. It was fucking hilarious. I rewound it and watched it a second time. I laughed so hard at that spot. And the ending saw Carmella tapping out to Naomi, so Naomi has got some decent momentum going into SummerSlam. But right now, I'm picking Natalya to win that belt at SummerSlam for a couple of reasons. Number one, she's way overdue. Natalya, I don't believe, has won the women's title since it transformed away from being the Divas title. And also, this year's SummerSlam is the 20-year anniversary of Bret Hart beating The Undertaker for the WWE title at SummerSlam 1997. And did you see Natty post the mock SummerSlam 1997 poster? As a matter of fact, I'm going to put those two posters up here on the screen and leave them there for the duration of this commentary. But you remember back at SummerSlam 97, one of my favorite pay-per-view posters ever was Bret Hart standing there with a big silhouette of The Undertaker over top of him, and it was called Heart and Soul. And Natty had one made where she's standing in Bret's spot, and instead of The Undertaker, it's Naomi. Very cool. So I think it would be a nice thing for WWE to do, to give Natalya the belt on the 20-year anniversary of her uncle winning the WWE title from The Undertaker in a pretty famous SummerSlam. The Fashion Files segment this week was a little bit weird. It was still funny. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. Tyler Breeze was dreaming, had some sort of dream sequence with the Ascension and Fandango dancing around or something. I didn't really know what that was all about, but they're still trying to figure out who was behind these attacks and these kidnappings and all of that. So those Fashion Files segments are just as goofy as ever. We had the Usos coming out cutting a really funny promo. They even fooled the crowd by doing the New Day's entrance. You know, when Big E is behind the curtain going, "Oh yeah, are you ready?" or whatever the fuck he says. They start doing that and the fans start chanting, and then the Usos come out, and it just turned out to be Jay or Jimmy who was impersonating Big E and impersonated him pretty well. I'm assuming we're going to get another match between these two teams at SummerSlam for the tag team titles, and I guess the New Day took this week off to sell their injuries from their beatdown last week, and they'll probably be back on SmackDown on next week's show. We had Aiden English getting another victory. He's stringing them up. He beat Ty Dillinger, I believe, at the pay-per-view a couple of weeks ago, and now he defeated Sami Zayn. After the match, Mike and Maria came out to the aisleway there just to taunt Sami Zayn. We're probably going to get another Mike Kanellis, versus Sami Zayn match at SummerSlam, most likely on the kickoff show. And it looks like they're starting to do something with Aiden English, maybe giving him a few victories and giving this guy a little miniature push. So we'll see how long this lasts and how far it goes. And that was pretty much it for SmackDown. Overall, SmackDown was a great show. So if I had to grade these shows, I give SmackDown an A and I give Raw a D-. I also mentioned the Superstar shakeup earlier on. There have been some reports of that. WWE has come out and said they have no plans to do that until after WrestleMania, which is fine with me. I don't want to see a whole bunch of these roster changes throughout the year. I would like to see these rosters maintain their own identities, and whenever they do start trading talent back and forth, it probably should just be once a year. But here's something I propose. I wish they would change this up a little bit. Instead of doing these Superstar shakeups where they are completely at random. Back in the day, they used to do the draft where each brand got to pick guys from the other one or whatever. There's been all sorts of different rules to it. But what I would like to see them do, and this would also help WWE if they put somebody on a brand that they really shouldn't have. When we hear these stories about the superstar shakeup, it might be because WWE doesn't like the way certain guys are working out on the brand and they want to get them off of there, or they want to move them, and a superstar shakeup is the way to do it. But what I think they should do is they should start treating this a little bit more like a real sport. You've got the brand extension. You've got 2 different shows with 2 different sets of guys. I think you do 1 superstar shakeup per year, maybe a week or 2 after WrestleMania, like always. You have a couple of trades or you flop some talent back and forth, but then you give each brand, maybe throughout the remainder of the year, you give them trades. Each brand is allowed to trade 2 times or 3 times or something like that. Maybe even implement trade deadlines. Maybe after the superstar shakeup is over, each brand has until like September or October or maybe even the end of the year to do any trades that you want. And you actually have a trade deadline. You hear about that in the NFL and the NBA and a lot of professional sports. Whenever the trade deadline starts approaching, the news is abuzz because they know teams are talking to each other. There's shit being discussed. Most likely guys are going to be moving teams and switching around a little bit. So instead of doing just a random superstar shakeup, Vince McMahon comes out and cuts a promo and says, we're going to shake things up around here. Next week, we're going to move a whole bunch of guys, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. If you set up some rules for the brand extension and try to stick to them, I think that can help the brand extension overall. Do 1 shakeup per year right after WrestleMania, and then allow both brands the opportunity to trade with each other a couple of times. Maybe even put a limit on that. If you guys want to do trades, that's fine. You can work out anything that you want with each other, but you can only do it 3 times. And there's also going to be a deadline. After a certain date, you can't make any more trades until after the next superstar shakeup. And that could really generate some interest. It could generate good ratings for Raw and SmackDown on the weeks of the trade deadlines. And I think they should start doing something like that. Start putting some things on paper. Start putting some rules together for the brand extension. That way, if you have the potential for trades and you don't like the way a guy is working out at a certain brand, you can write a storyline to get him off of there instead of just throwing a random. I hate the random shit. I hate when they just announce something and say, hey, oh, by the way, next week, we're going to completely shake up the rosters. I don't think they should do things like that anymore now that the brand extension is in full effect. So that'll wrap it up for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Give me all your thoughts and comments and opinions on everything I talked about here down in the comments section below. And just as a reminder, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, next week's commentary, episode 448, will be a day or 2 late because I will be on vacation. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and I will talk to you probably in about 9 or 10 days. Until next time, peace.